5 seconds. You're live.
Good evening. This is Wednesday, March 6, 2024, 5:30 PM. This is the Auburn Finance Committee. Just to read our remote participation script for tonight. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, it's 1-786-535-3211 with an access code of 991-599-357, or the public can join via their computer at https://gotomeeting.com/join. The same access code, 991-599-357. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda participating remotely are present or can hear me. Everybody for this board is present, but I'll still call out the roll. Ed Coleman.
Here.
Michael Marshall.
Here.
Patrick Jones.
Here.
George Graham.
Here.
And Stephen Consiglio.
Here.
Town officials and employees participating, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Town Manager Ed Kazanovich.
Here.
CFO, Town Accountant Karen Harnoy.
Here.
And Administrative Assistant Sharon Kwiatkowski.
Here.
Okay, so the meeting is called to order. We'll start with some discussion this evening, according to our agenda, discussion on the capital improvements plan budget. Sir?
So I guess we'll provide a song and dance. So anyway, we provided to each member a one-page summary of the capital as it applies to the current fiscal year, which you'll be taking a position on under Article 4. That being said, we did provide a 5-year plan with supporting documentation to the Finance Committee when you got your full packet for the budget. What we attempted to do to try to clarify things by department and categories to give you a sense as to what our capital is being spent on, and the funding sources associated with funding a total request of $3,881,427. So as you can see on the one-page summary, it lists the capital. We categorized it in 5 categories: equipment, vehicles, capital buildings, road work and drainage, and other. To give you a sense as to what the value is by category, as you can see, starting with MIS all the way to schools, it drops those values into those various categories. So the total equipment request for FY25 town-wide, including schools, is $714,374. When we look at our vehicles, that value is $1,526,053, of which $522,014 represents existing obligations in terms of lease agreements for those vehicles. When we look at our capital buildings, we are recommending $1,026,000. And let me just say, all the detail is provided in the multi-page itemization in the capital item in your budget book. Road work and drainage, $605,000. And other, which is under the clerk's office for the repair of historical books, which has been ongoing for a while, $10,000. When we look at the total amount of capital of $3.881 million, it's being funded through various sources. Tax levy amount is $1,561,031. Ambulance proceeds for an ambulance vehicle under fire, $400,000. That's an outright purchase. All of the sewer capital is paid through sewer retained earnings, $314,396. One-time stabilization for a fire department engine of $200,000. ACTV, all their capital is funded through retained earnings of $40,000. CIP Trust, there are a handful of items in this CIP totaling $30,000, with the remaining balance being funded through bond proceeds of $1,336,000. We may recommend an amendment to the library item of $15,000. We had discussions with the director. We have prior year monies that we carried over for upgrading of computer equipment that may not necessitate the need for $15,000. So she'll be coming in. We've had discussions with her. She believes that we can remove that, but I want to make sure that she's present when we have that discussion in the event that you should have any questions relative to that earmark. So with that being said, we made several modifications to the 5-year CIP based upon a number of criteria. 1, escalating costs. 2, availability of funds. And 3, a potential prioritization by department based upon need. That is reflective in the 5-year report. Certainly, we wanted to give you a summary of what is being asked. And we encourage you to ask questions as the departments come before you in justification, not only for the operating budget, but for their capital as well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, any general questions you may have relative to the 5-year CIP.
Thank you. Actually, this really helps us when we're looking at the backup, because we may want to drive questions towards funding sources and so forth. So the extra detail and everything is incredible, because it will help to minimize a lot of thought. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is in preparing for your presentation tonight, not knowing this was going to be made available, I made a couple of observations, and one of them is that I tried to do it. I gave it about a half hour, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't want to put much more time into it, because I felt that if I have to fish that far, then maybe it needs to be presented a little different. But what I noticed, and I have to go back and look in more detail, but the manager has a CIP, a request for fiscal year 26, and then I didn't know if any of that had been already expended in a prior year other than fiscal year 24. It says manager $35,000, and I think it was for a records vault suppression system. And so, of course, because it was the first item on the CIP in the book, I went to the very first section of blue, and it wasn't there. So I noticed that the backup wasn't there, but I have an idea of what it would be, but I didn't notice the backup there. But in all fairness, I didn't go through every section yet. But it would have been nice if the sections were in line with the line items.
So, a great question. I can tell you that the detail was provided to the Finance Committee the year it was requested.
Exactly, which is what I thought, that some of the years that these went on to the schedules, that's when and
Yes.
Unfortunately for people that are coming on now, it makes it difficult because we have no insight on that, because it's information from the past. And I make that connection because it hasn't happened yet, and yet we're new and we're just being made aware of it. Just an observation. So I don't know if it's possible to think about that when you're passing the budgets forward year after year, that if you're going to keep something on in a future year, you might want to incorporate a copy of that same backup into it, just for transitioning members.
Yeah,
and
I
so
think
forth.
at this point, and that's a great point. I mean, certainly, I think evident by the fact that you tried to bridge that 35 to a level of detail that's not there.
Right.
I guess to hunt that down now may be time.
Sure.
Labor intensive.
Yeah.
But we can make that request of our department heads that they provide all the supporting detail for all the years as part of your review in the event you have any questions.
Sure, and not only that, but like you said, this is a moving target. Things are going to come off, there's going to be a shift of prioritizations. It may end up being that a department, after including it for 2 years, removes it and then puts something else in. So if it's a snapshot in time, and it's something we have to, you know, I don't want to spend 35 minutes looking for something I'm never going to find.
I can tell you that if something is amended and there's something programmed into the 5-year window, that level of detail is in here,
Sure.
okay?
Great, thank you.
I had a question just generically between the difference between the municipal and the school side, because we've got a 971,000 in borrowing on the school side. And I'm curious, isn't the whole purpose of the CIP plan more or less to be saving to avoid borrowing?
That's our intent. So typically, we tried, and that's why we had an infusion of 1/10 of 2.5 since 2012. Back before 2012, we used zero tax levy to fund our capital. We're now using 1.5 million, and that's growing every year. Except for this year, there's a 1-year reprieve, only because we had a very difficult time funding our operational needs, an attempt to save jobs and save bodies from being laid off. We hope to restore that, but we recognize that we have to deal with some difficult times. We were never put in a situation such as we are today since 2012, quite honestly. We never, but we're in one of those cycles, so we expect a bumpy ride for the next couple of years. And we would have to analyze that on a year-to-year basis. What I can tell you is we were in a position to fund our capital within a 5-year period without relying on any bond proceeds. So that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to do that. But once again, we hit a rough patch in the road, and we're asking for a 1-year reprieve. Because by not borrowing money, you're not paying interest costs. So ultimately, it's a savings to the taxpayers in the long run.
Additional questions? I guess I've just got a question relative to maybe the accounting of it, looking out so far. There are some that don't have, I understand the ones that are the lease payments, the vehicles that are purchased and paid for over multiple years. But for instance, ones, we'll take, Chris is here, we'll take the Auburn Community, you know, they don't have anything, $20,000 in 2029. You know, what does that represent, and how does that, accounting-wise, by putting that sort of placeholder there, what does that do? Is that just what it is? It's a placeholder for you when you do your final budgets for those years approaching, that you know that you had $20,000 there?
So it's not a placeholder, because typically, and I'll use ACTV, they rely strictly on retained earnings to fund their capital needs. He's taken a snapshot in time and telling us there's a need for certain equipment as a result of retiring equipment becoming obsolete. We're asking all departments to look forward. They need to be forward-thinking. What is the need? We need to capture that need. And in some cases, such as fire, they do a 20-year needs assessment, not just a 5-year. So we're looking really beyond 5 years in a lot of the major departments, DPW, fire. But the charter only requires a submission of a 5-year capital need program, not a 20-year. And if you look at the summary of the 5-year plan, it identifies those funding sources for the next 5 years as well.
I have a question that I feel like I probably should have understood before now, so I apologize if it's sort of a dumb one, but just looking at like police in particular, their section, like with the backup, has a fiscal year 2030, $30,000 for a new drone. And then this year, they're, in 2025, we are bookmarked, I think, what is it, 35,000 for a drone. So The 35,000, that was approved several years ago? Or is that what we're actually voting to approve when we, at the end of this all,
So-
approve the capital improvement?
Let me just look at police for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I,
Because I understand, like, they're putting together their backup to show, hey, these are new things that we're adding to the capital improvement plan over the next few years. Are we voting on the new stuff, or are we voting on 2025 when we vote?
so
Because-
you're making a recommendation for 2025, but by voting Article 4, you're actually blessing the entire 5-year plan.
Okay.
And actually, I was just going to mention, because we have new members on the board, when we go through the budget review, we'll ask questions on this, but we don't actually vote on it until the end of the budget season when we've covered all the material. So we don't, because it's a one budget, considered one budget like all the departments, we can talk about it, but you'll notice that we're not going to vote on it until the whole thing is covered, just so you're clear on, they have.
So there's an intent by town meeting, even reflective on your vote, that you're committing to a 5-year
Year plan.
package. And we rely on that because in some cases, we can't get a vehicle, there's a 3-year delivery, so we're relying on those future year commitments to place an order, even though the money's not available, we know that in the year that it's earmarked, it will be available, so.
Totally makes sense. I think I've always thought of my vote as for the year that we're talking about now, and just looking at how many of these proposals are 3 or 4 years out or more, I feel like I will have more questions about some of those longer-term items probably this year than I have in the past.
But keep in mind, the 5-year plan can change from year
Yeah.
to year, and those items may evaporate, or they may change, or they may, yeah.
We've said several times, this is going to be probably the tightest year that you said that you've had. Certainly since the time I've been on this committee, the tightest year. Probably the most, other than structures, I think the most forward-facing thing that we have are vehicles. And we've heard it multiple times at town meetings, why does, inspection services need vehicles? I see just sitting in the town hall. Why does the police department always comes up? I drive by and there's X number of cruisers there. What type of difficult decisions, or where have you tightened these numbers up, knowing that we're at the full of, we've pushed everything to the limit? And I understand some of it, I think you've noted here, 522,000 is already lease obligations from cars that we've already got, that we continue to pay for. But where going forward, and I use vehicles just because it is front-facing, and I know from talking to fleet maintenance that it takes money to keep cars going, and the older cars get, the more money, so you pay more for the older vehicles, but just on that one in particular, as where are we sort of, so this can be an answer to the public?
The message has been pump the brakes because that feeling of the town buying more vehicles than they need, that's out there. We've heard that. The fact of the matter is that's not true, okay? When you break it down, I think your department heads will tell you there's a need for more vehicles than what we have right now. The disconnect is, and I think you're seeing it now, is the amount of money we're spending on our vehicles, and I know transfers have come before you, and they're gonna continue to come, to keep our vehicles running and keep them on the road. That's indicative of an aging fleet that really would necessitate just the opposite, buying more vehicles. Although I would tell you, they're not making vehicles like they made them years ago. You're not getting as much life out of those vehicles. But we're doing what we can in terms of preventive maintenance to limit the amount of acquisitions that we're making through the 5-year capital plan. I can tell you, over the years, we made an effort to update our fleet as it pertains to DPW, the larger rolling stock. They get beat up the most. The salt is eating away the frames of the vehicles, and, the treatment of roads is totally different today than it was years ago. They primarily use sand. Now we're using salt, and it's corroding what we have for our rolling stock. So I think that's kind of putting us behind a little bit, because we're not getting as many years as we used to get.
We're paying more money and we're getting less return.
Yeah.
And I think we will get pushback, especially on the police, in that and I know the reasons why we have the Tahoes now, because the Ford just wasn't delivering the Ford Police Interceptor. And we probably had that same pushback when Crown Victorias went away and people saw all these new Explorers out there. Well, I just had someone comment to me the other day, well, look at Auburn PD, they've got all those nice Explorers parked out front. So it's more visible right now that I think folks are gonna be questioning, you know.
We've had these discussions, and I know they're gonna tell you that the Tahoes that they've purchased are cheaper than the Explorers that they used to get.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
it's a different vehicle,
Yeah,
is what I'm
I
saying.
mean-
So people know I didn't see those last year, now I see whatever it is, 5 or 6 new Tahoes, you know, and now you're asking me for, you know, taxpayers for this amount. So it's just, that's very front-facing, the vehicles are. So I was just curious, you know, exactly how you were able to tighten this up from this year.
Believe me, we fight this battle all the time, so we have lengthy discussions with our department heads on the request for vehicles. Some requests are denied, some are delayed. We try to program it in to make it affordable as best we can. But once again, it's availability, and we know the cost is going up, and it makes it that much more difficult to manage.
Thank you.
To coattail on Kevin's first point, if we know that this is a moving target, but we know that the future is linked to the past, would it be unrealistic to think that maybe if you had a number that was, say, in fiscal year 26 or 27 last year, and it was $80,000, it was sitting on a line item, and we were thinking that's going to be 80,000, and then this year, we realize it's going to drop to 40, or it's going to go up to 80. Would it be unreasonable to think that we could bold or italicize that to show that it's been an existing CIP, but it's been changed?
I think when you look at the CIP, you're gonna see the original request.
Okay.
And if it's modified
It's gonna
or
be obvious.
changed, you're gonna see
It's going to
that.
become obvious.
Yeah.
Good point. The original's there. Right, thank you. Good point. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I would just encourage the department heads, especially on the CIP stuff, to come in with what their strategy is. You know, if it's, we keep a vehicle and backed up by the fleet and maintenance division to say, the sweet spot for vehicles is no more than 5 years, 7 years, or X number of miles. And that's the point where we know, and that we know that we have this many coming up, and this year it's gonna be 6 that are gonna hit that number, and next year it's gonna be 4, and the year after it's gonna be 7, just as opposed to a flat, you know, this is our cookie cutter, we do this many. Just whatever they can have to help us this year, as things are tighter. I think it's gonna be a year that, I think members of the committee are gonna have people asking us, well, why are we doing this, and why'd you approve this, and why'd you do that? That's all.
I have a separate question. Do the towns purchase vehicles individually, or do we go through the state procurement system?
We do what's in the best interest of the town, so typically they get it off a Mass State contract, which the pricing is normally cheaper that way, but that does not preclude us from getting other quotes that may be substantially less than that. In most cases, you're gonna find that the Mass State contracts offer the best pricing.
You know, because we bought a truck at the housing, and I was rather surprised at how inexpensive it was.
How what?
Inexpensive it was compared to what I was expecting it to cost.
And that was off a Mass State contract?
Now,
Yeah.
it's because of the state, yeah. But I don't know if they give us the same favors or not. That was really my question. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions relative to CIP? Obviously, like Patrick said, once we have the department heads here, we'll, if I forget by some chance, Michael will remind me. If there's a department that has something on the CIP, I'll try and highlight them, but, you know, that's our time to ask questions, and I think this was beneficial just to kind of for us to get a better handle on what it is, as opposed to a quick, you know, approve or disapprove, so thank you for this.
Great.
Thank you for the update, by the way.
Okay, we have a few budgets to review. First one being the town clerks. We have the town clerk. Would you like to come up and
I want to thank her for coming out. She's exhausted. She was here till 2 o'clock in the morning, tallying the results and doing post-election work, so thank you, Ginger.
Sure, not a problem.
Anything you wanted to discuss about the budget, anything unusual?
So the only thing that I have on here that I'm looking for an increase is for the election workers. So currently, they are getting paid $10 an hour. So the regular workers are getting $10 an hour. Our election clerks are getting, let me see, they're getting $10.81 an hour. And then the wardens, which we have 2 of them, they would be getting $10.81 an hour, and then $25 per election. Okay, so there, I do have here, I did make some extra copies. There was a survey from all the different, from 70 different towns in Mass on what towns pay their election workers. There's only 2 other towns that's in this list that pay their election workers $10 an hour. Other towns are up to $15 an hour. So I'm looking to at least bring them up to that. And then, you know, like the other rates, the clerks would be $15.81, and then the wardens would be $15.81, and then the $25 per each election. The amount of hours that they put in, yesterday we started at 6 o'clock in the morning. The last ones left at, I think it was about 10:30 at the high school. So polls closed at 8 o'clock, and we were there for another 2.5 hours, tallying everything up, trying to get everything to fit together. So, you know, they put in a lot of hours. There are a lot of great residents in town. Sometimes we have a few little fires that we have to put out, but nothing big. But, you know, it's just a lot that they have to deal with. So I'm just looking to reimburse them for their time that I believe that they deserve. So, okay, so.
I'm amazed that you got anybody down there for $10 an hour.
It's tough, and they don't, so the workers don't have to live in Auburn. So if they live here in Auburn and another town that's close by is paying them more, they can absolutely go out there, you know? So like I said, I do have extra of these if you guys would like them, okay? And I also did a breakdown of, I don't know if you have it or not. Here, I'll give you these. I'm just gonna keep this. Here, you can take these too if you want. You're welcome. So I did a breakdown of how many hours we spend, and it's on this small piece of paper. I only did a few of them.
It's okay.
But what I did was I did an hour in the extra in the morning, and then I did 2 hours at the end of the 2 hours. Sorry, an hour in the morning and then an hour at the end for your state elections, and then I also figured 12 hours for a town election. This was to give you an idea of what they would be getting paid per election, how many hours they work, what we have to go through before each election. So it was just an idea of roughly what they would be looking at, and it's a group of everybody, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we've got 2 budgets in one here, right? So we'll review the town clerk's one first. Department request is $211,893. Town manager's is $210,893. Any detailed questions relative to the town clerk's budget?
The only item that was removed was the state certification stipend.
It hasn't been obtained yet, correct, Ginger?
Correct. Yeah,
Just like to know.
yeah. It takes a few years to get it, so I do have some of the past experience. I just need to figure out where I would sit. And unfortunately, with the upcoming May election, I don't know who is coming in, if they're going to have that ability to get it or not.
Any questions on this one?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
And the second one is 162, elections. This one is, department requested $65,377. Town manager agreed, it's an increase of $15,133. 30% increase, but that is almost entirely due to the requested in the election workers, correct? Questions on this one?
And just to clarify, that's both because of the increase and because we have more elections this year than in a typical year?
Yes, so this next fiscal year, we'll have three. We'll have the September, November, and then the town in May. Yes.
Just want to make sure it's clear that this isn't entirely tied to that
Yeah,
increase.
no,
so.
yeah, that's why I did that other breakdown for you, so that way you would see that we have those three elections, yep.
Yeah, my footnote, I think we need to update the footnote on that, Ginger. Mine says FY '24 presidential primary and annual election. Does everyone say that?
Yes, I think
It should say FY '25 presidential election, annual election, and,
town election.
yeah, which one is
So
this?
which one are you talking about?
Three elections, right?
Yes, yep, September, November, and May. So this paper here, I put the dates
Oh, okay,
next to
but
each
on the
of them.
budget itself.
Oh, on the budget itself, okay, all right,
We'll update that.
okay, yep.
So at least our town meeting members will know.
All right. Any questions?
Any questions?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye. I also just wanted to point out, we have a 10,000 in CIP from the clerk's budget for book repairs. I think we do that almost every year, so I don't know what we
Okay,
have.
yep.
If anyone has any questions about it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next one is Department of Public Service Senior Center, Elder Affairs Division. Gene? Let me just find.
$541.
541, right?
Yep.
Under public services.
How are you?
Good, how are you, Kevin?
Good. Do you have any updates for us for the, relative to the senior center or Elder Affairs budgets?
So the senior center budget, it's an increase of 2.29%. We tried to keep everything as much as we could level funded. The only increase that you will see is director salary, and it was a comparison to other senior center directors in surrounding towns to try and keep that position. So it's in line with other senior center directors, as I said, in other towns. The van driver's salary, it was reduced to $41,000. Everything else is the same, I believe, except for our van, the gasoline charge, I had put $13,000. And when looking at the past, working with Ed and Karen and Dory, we decided to bring that down to $11,000, not knowing what the gas price will be due to fluctuation.
Can you just explain, just for new members on the board, relative to your budget and some of your funding sources? So most of your funding sources here that we see before us are facilities and
Yep, so this
staff.
is
What you do-
facilities, and this is just for, the first part you'll see is salaries. We also have a outreach director, which is paid for by the state formula grant. And then we have a part-time program coordinator who works 20 hours a week, and her salary is in that. So the senior center has a director, it has an outreach coordinator, which is paid for by the formula grant, and part-time program coordinator. And we have 3 part-time van drivers. That's all we have for staff at the senior center.
In the programs, again, folks here may not know what the senior center does. Certainly you had some damage to the facility that was fixed, and I haven't been up myself. I should get up there to see. I heard they did a beautiful job in there, but can you just talk about like the programs, the amount of people that take advantage of the senior
Yeah,
center?
so I gave everyone a newsletter, so as you can see, we have exercise classes every day at 10 o'clock. The instructors are paid for by the state formula grant. We have, say, on Mondays, it could be knit and stitch, which is, programs for seniors to come in. We have a yoga class. We have either movies or entertainment. We do have a FASCA group, which stands for the Friends of the Auburn Senior Center, which is another funding source. If we ask, we can get funds. They'll pay for entertainment. They might pay for refreshments that we might need at an event. They paid for the Christmas party. They partially funded $10 for every ticket that was sold. I don't have my newsletter, but say on Tuesdays, we'll have like a cheer dance class. We have a yoga class, and then we have a Let's Move Together exercise class. Wednesdays, we have knit and stitch in the morning. We have, there's a strength and balance class in the morning. We also have pitch. Pitch is big in the senior center. Bingo is big on Thursdays. iPad class, technology class. We have lunches every day at 12 o'clock. Bridge, we have quilting, a lot of different activities, so there's variety for, if someone doesn't like bingo, then we'll have maybe a class with Dr. Claremont might come in, and we try to do as much things as we can for, on a volunteer basis, and they come for free, mostly. Not all the time, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Jean relative to senior center? So the department request for this year's budget was $201,566. Town manager's recommendation, $191,902. An increase of $4,295. Any questions?
Are we okay to approve just the senior center, since this is part of the Department of Public Services? Or we can approve just the senior center? Okay. Motion to recommend just the senior center elder affairs budget at the town manager.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Human Resources, which is 152. I think Dora's away, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if she was she going to make it back or no? Okay. So I don't know if you want to act on this now, or if you want to reschedule this for a future day where she has an opportunity to come in and explain. This would be under her. Be happy to act on it tonight, it's up to you. I can just tell you the major change in this budget is the elimination, albeit I hope to say temporarily, of our HR generalist as a way to balance the budget. So when we presented the budget to the board, we identified this position being eliminated. It was not an easy decision because we put a lot of stock in basically doing a reorganization of government when we brought Dory on board. I previously held a position as Assistant Town Manager, CFO, When Karen came on board, she got the designation of CFO with the title of town accountant, and we put the HR, because Dory's an HR director, under the assistant town manager to beef up the need in employee human resources. We eliminated the position because the position currently is vacant. The individual that was in that position left. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but it had to be made. So we're hoping to restore that at some point, but right now, it's being recommended as not being budgeted.
Any questions on this one?
Would the reason for restoring it later be because the duties of an assistant town manager you expect will absorb the majority of this individual's time? And so you'd want to restore it to offer the support that you'll need in HR?
So as part of the reorganization, we put it under one roof, and that
Right.
included school department
Right.
issues as well. So we'll be leaning back on the school department to provide a level of service that actually was transitioned over to this generalist position. So it's going to create a need for some additional support at the school. So we'll have that conversation with the superintendent and the school business manager on how best to service the needs of the schools going forward.
Now that you brought up the schools, wasn't this a salary that we were sharing with the schools, or was it the position just shared?
No, the position was just shared. We budgeted 100% of the wage in HR.
And not to get too into the weeds, I mean, this is, I'm sure as yourself, it's a bit concerning. I think HR is much more complicated than it
Very complicated.
ever has been, and I'm concerned both for the employees of the town to ensure they get the appropriate level of services and the backgrounds are done correctly for, all the legal reasons, and there's just a lot in the HR world right now, and a lot of people moving around. It seems that the days of going to work for one company and staying there for 30 years are gone. So, I mean, we've seen people, moving in and out of positions, and, I'm just a bit concerned, with just the director and then, others who may not have that level of expertise.
We do have another full-time support person in HR coordinator. The added position brought some much-needed, service to that division. But with Dory's level of expertise, being the HR director in a large city, she brings a lot to the table. So we're hoping to bridge that gap for a period of time in hopes of reinstating this position down the road.
Thank you. So this is a department request for this one, $313,690. Town manager's recommendation is $251,230. Less $52,622 of 17, difference of 17.32% less than last year. Any questions or recommendations?
Actually, I do have one question.
Sir.
Thank you. The medical exams, given the turnover recently with the police and fire departments, is that $9,000 going to be sufficient? Or do you think because of some of the turnover and new onboarding, that they could be needing more money there?
So typically, our medical exam line item is normally when we bring new individuals on board. The fact that we have no new personnel, we believe that would be adequate enough to meet our needs.
Great, okay.
Now, it doesn't account for retirements, but I can tell you, any retirement is going to be looked at very closely, given the, given the current situation. So we're going to have to decide whether we want to fill those right away, whether we want to hold off. We could be seeing additional 9C cuts in the year that we're in. So we got to be able to react in the event things get a little bleaker than what they are now. And that may require us not to fill positions on a timely basis.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next one is debt, which,
It's in the back.
maturing debt, 710, is that correct? Number 710 in your books.
You just got so much thrown in front of you all at once, I figured you didn't see it.
Who's going to?
Karen, you want this one?
Karen, you want this one?
Sure. So the maturing debt that's budgeted for fiscal year 2025, everything here has been long-term borrowed. So these are right from the debt amortization schedules of what we have outstanding right now. There is going to be another, or there's anticipated to be another borrowing, but it won't be until, I believe it's August? August of 2024, so there won't be any principal payments.
You wouldn't pay you're not expecting even a small principal payment before the end of the fiscal year?
No, so when you borrow, I'm sure you're familiar with this, Patrick, typically it's structured in such a way where after 6 months, you make your first interest payment,
Right.
which is budgeted, and then on the anniversary date of the bond issue, you make your debt.
Oh, right, and that's going to be after fiscal year,
Right.
July
Yeah,
July
of the
1st, right,
next
thank you,
fiscal
yeah,
year.
okay. I just know that sometimes bonds and stuff get within May and June, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't stumbling into that borrowing
Right.
time. Okay, thank you.
As you can see, I want to draw your attention to the top line. That's the debt we retired for the high school. So as you can see, a substantial reduction of roughly 1.2 million as a result of retiring that debt. So that's going to translate to a savings to the taxpayer by not raising that additional amount outside of the levy.
Any questions on this one? Steve?
My question's not so much about this, but the plan for the fire station and how that fits into all of this.
So, Steve, I don't know if you heard, but the fire chief came before the Board of Selectmen, and I think the original intent was to bring it to the voters this May. It's just too aggressive of a timeline. We don't want to rush it. I think our taxpayers need to know what the impacts are going to be. I think they need to know that we're trying to time this in such a way that we want to educate our residents before we bring it to the voters. So with that being said, I think the plan is to delay any action on that until the following fiscal year.
Anything else?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And we'll move over to interest, which would be 752.
Just to call your attention to a couple of items in this budget. So you have the ban interest of the 56,155, that's for the ban that will come due in August. And then we anticipate doing another borrowing, and that's added in to down below where it says the 70,000 for a new account. We're estimating borrowing $2.9 million, and we're estimating an interest payment there for $70,000. And the other ones are already on our long-term debt schedules.
Can you remind me what band interest is?
On anticipation notes, that's of a short term.
That's short term.
It's usually less
So I
than 1
think
year.
that should read, because we're permanently bonding in August, which is going to fold in our current ban plus whatever we have for '24, which is roughly 1.3 million. I think we have 600 now. So that should really read an estimated GOB, not BAN, correct?
Yes, yep, that'll be.
So
So-
$70,000 would be our interest payment based upon a borrowing of 2.9 million.
Which is a general obligation bond.
Right.
GOB.
So we're going to change ask you to make that change. Instead of BAN of 2.9 million, it's going to be a GOB. That's general obligation bond. That would be a long-term, 10-year bond issue.
I'm sorry, which line is that one?
Third from the bottom, where it says new account.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions on this?
Just to clarify, just because I see ban on, is that ban going to convert to a borrowing? It's a payment out. I know it's just the interest, but is the ban going to be absorbed in a long-term bond?
Yes.
It will.
So that ban will be absorbed by that new GOB.
New
that
GOB,
we're- yeah.
thank you. So that'll spill into, thank you.
Yes.
Motion to recommend?
I'll just read it off just for the record.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Department request $751,960. Town manager's recommendation $751,960. You have a motion to recommend?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
And last one, Town Hall, which is number 192.
While we're getting there, I just wanted to extend a thank you to the staff, because every year they have to do this. It's an incredible amount of time to end meetings, get these books thrown together in the order that they're in. So I just want to recognize the effort that goes into pulling this together for the various boards, so thank you. Thank you.
Sharon?
Ed, this one's pretty self-explanatory. What do you
Yeah,
think?
so we level funded. Certainly, this can be in a budget that at times catches us by surprise. I know we have an elevator invoice or recommendation when they did an inspection that's going to require a $7,000 commitment. So when they note some of the deficiencies, I don't think they would fail it, but if something should happen, then we be exposed to some liability. So it's something we can't take lightly. That's something that we'll try to address in the current fiscal year if we can, but those are some of the unknowns that we may get hit with during the course of the year. When we look at budget to actual for the current year, we feel as though that the recommendation would be adequate to meet the need, but certainly we do have those situations, whether it's a pipe that blows for our sprinkler system that we may have a leak in. Those are some of the things that we're forced to react in short notice. And I think that's why we put a lot of emphasis on keeping our reserve account adequately funded to meet some of those emergency needs.
Can you just remind me, when we have the transfers in for those things, I think this building had something with a pipe or a sprinkler or
Yeah.
something that was, does that then go back to reflect into that account? So if we see, for instance, building maintenance in FY '23 had sort of a spike up to 21,000, is that because we put additional money into that account for that year? Is that reflected there?
No, it doesn't reflect the transfers, although the expense would be reflective in the three-year average, but the appropriation would not reflect any supplemental appropriations. It would at the fall town meeting, but not from the reserve account. I can tell you, like the sprinkler system, when we came, we kind of did a patch on the system, and we did a warrant article that went to town meeting. I think we were in the fall for like $10,000 that allowed us to do it through some other funding that we made a recommendation on. But in that case, the outside warrant article does not get baked into what you're seeing here.
So 21, 22, and 23 are like reflective of actual spend.
Yes.
24 is what was originally
Yes.
appropriated, but yeah,
Yep.
so. Every year except last year's is accurate, and only because last year hasn't ended
Because
yet.
number one,
Yeah.
we don't know the actuals for '24, the year where they're in. We won't know that until after June 30th, so, yeah.
And I know I've asked this in past years, but sometimes stuff seems broken up in that things like building maintenance for the town hall ends up in this budget. There's the police department building maintenance ends up in their budget. There's little bits and pieces everywhere. Have we ever thought of having a facilities, you know, so we'd have a true cost of what our facilities cost us. You know, now that we have a facility sort of division with the repairs and, it's just
We
a
could.
question.
I think part of the difficulties in doing that, because a lot of times we rely on that level of detail at the department level to provide information that might qualify us for grants. So in other words, the library, we have to capture that cost within the library and not take it out because we have to meet a level of minimum contribution in support of a budget or in support of a level of state aid. So if we carve that out, we're only hurting ourselves.
But further on that, do we look at those, say, for instance, we talk about sprinklers, when we contract a sprinkler vendor to ensure that we're getting the best pricing, do we have a service contract for 6 facilities as opposed to assigned one for the town hall and then assigned one for the library and assigned one just for the best pricing of things and maintenance costs?
Unfortunately, in some cases we do, but in those cases, we don't know the level of repairs that are gonna be needed on an annual basis. So it's hard for a vendor to price that out, not knowing the volume of work they may or may not get.
No, I understand the work, but the year-to-year inspections, the inspections that are needed to ensure your smoke alarms are all working, you know, as opposed to,
Yes, we do have service contracts for those type of, yes.
okay,
Yep.
thank you. Additional questions on town hall? Okay, so it was a department request of $57,500, town manager's request for $57,500.
Motion recommend?
Motion to recommend, and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we have one transfer to do. This one is from Human Resources / the town managers. Interdepartmental transfer coming from the HR generalist account, which we just had some discussion on, going to the town manager clerical account. Reason given for the transfer, salary adjustment for additional duties added to the staff assistant position. Amount requested $2,150. Any questions?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
We have a
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve,
Oh,
thank you.
Second, again.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Tried to jump in and you had the wrong term. That's,
No, I just wanted to move it along.
we're moving. We have some minutes, and if there's no question on the minutes, we'll consider those to be accepted. Any other business? We've got meetings scheduled for,
If you look on the reverse side of your agenda,
oh, look at that.
I'll schedule.
Two-sided copies. Okay, so next week, we've got police, fire, and emergency management. Schools, the week after that. Were we able to get, no, Bay Path wasn't able to do until,
They were, yeah,
We had a commitment the day schools are scheduled to come in here.
that's fine.
Is that's under the Y, or are they going to give us a temporary budget? Or is Bay Path going to be in a position to give us an actual budget?
So I think they're giving us a budget based upon the level of funding they know of now, and that's the governor's budget. Now, certainly that may change, but, so that could be a moving target.
Yep, just to bring it to everyone's
But
attention.
we know the enrollment's not going to change, it's just the level of
Level
chapter
of
70
chapters, monies, sure.
and transportation money they may receive. Quite honestly, I don't see it getting any better.
Right. But just to point out to everyone, they'll do their best to present, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. Are there some departments that may get added? Have we covered everybody in all of these, or are there still some departments that we're seeking?
All of them are captured here, right? Okay.
there's a few other ones we'll have to add in sometime.
So we need to possibly discuss a time to start next week, because I know we have the date blocked, but we don't have a time. Right.
At 5:30, does 5:30 work okay for everybody? I know we did it because we expected a longer meeting last week. Is it a little tight for you, George?
I'll just leave a little early next time.
We can, go.
No, no, that's fine.
You sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. But thank you.
But let us know if there's something, you know, pretty reasonable group. Okay.
Once we get past budget season, we can go back to a later date, but there's a lot to cover.
Yeah, no, it works.
I likely will not be here next week, but I may send you some questions if I have.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, if we don't have anything further this evening, we've covered our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.